Okay, today we're going to be looking at some of the stories in the Panchatantra from your literature book, beginning page. Well, the introduction begins on page 15. We're going to look at the stories themselves. I gave you a different video as kind of an overview of what the Panchatantra itself is. First story is the Lion Makers. For young men, and you always in India need to look at caste. They are what caste they're from, and three of them are book smart but have no common sense. You ever known anybody like that? The fourth one is the other way around. He has street smarts, but he gets through school with a little help from his friends and getting his girlfriend to write his papers for him. You thought we didn't know about that. Well, they're starting out. They finished their schooling, and they're going to go somewhere off to the east to make some money. And they debate whether to let the fourth one, the one with only the street smarts, called Gumption, go with them. But he's been their friend all their lives, and so they go. And as they're traveling, top page 17, they come across the bones of a lion. Now, I know that we associate lions with Africa, but in fact, there is a population of Asiatic lions in India, in the western part of India, still today. And in historic times, Asiatic lions were found all across the Middle East, up into southeastern Europe, Greece, Bulgaria, that part of the world, and as far west as India. So, there are lions in India, even now. And look at what they decide to do to test their, they call it science, we would call it magic, to bring the lion back to life. Well, to bring the dead creature, they don't immediately realize what it is. And as they start putting it together, the one with the common sense but no book sense says, "Wait a minute, that's a lion. Lions eat meat. We're made out of meat." And they're like, stupid, what's the point of science if we don't use it? Well, he talks them into waiting until he climbs a tree, and sure enough, when they bring the lion to life, it kills them and then eventually wanders off. And Gumption climbs down and goes home. The moral of the story is in this little poem that begins and ends the story. Book learning people rightly cherish, but gumption, meaning common sense, is best of all to me. Bereft of gumption you shall perish, like to the lion makers three. Just because we have the technological ability to do something, does that necessarily mean it's a good idea to do it? Any of you seen any of the Jurassic Park movies? Isn't this what those movies were about? It might be really interesting to clone dinosaurs and bring them back. But then there is the problem. Some of them were really, really big and ate meat. And we're made out of meat. The second story, the title in your book is actually a Western proverb: count not your chickens before they be hatched. Starts off with a character, a Brahmin named Luckless. Now, you know right away things are not going to end well for him, right? He's like the born loser with that name. He has, as Hindu priests and ascetics do, has been accepting offerings that people give him of food, and he's got barley grits. Now, the grits that those of us who are Southerners love are corn grits. This is made from a different grain, but it's the same idea. And he's got some left over after he eats, and so he fills up a jar and hangs it on the wall, and he starts daydreaming. This pot is full of barley grits, and if there comes a famine, the whole thing is built on if. He'll be able to sell them for a bunch of silver, and with the silver he's going to buy she-goats, and because they reproduce rapidly, soon he'll have a herd of goats. He's going to sell the goats and buy cows, and build up his herd of cows, and then sell the cows and buy buffalo cows, which are even more valuable. And when he builds up his herd of buffalo cows, then he's going to sell them and buy mares, horses, and when he builds up his herd of horses, he'll get much gold from selling them. And with the gold, I love this, I'll get a house with 4 rooms. That's a big house. 4 rooms. See, caste is not about money. Being upper caste does not in and of itself mean that you are wealthy. Caste in India is very different from economic class in America. And then some Brahmin will come to my house and give me his lovely daughter with a rich dowry in marriage. And she'll bear me a son, and he's already got a name picked out for this son who doesn't yet exist, right? And when he's old enough for me to bounce him on my knee, I'll be taking a book and sitting out behind the stable studying it. And the little boy will come. I want him to be bounced on his knee, leaving his mother, and coming to me will be right near the horse's hoofs. Now, I don't know if you've ever been around horses, but the one place you do not want to be if a horse gets startled is behind it, because they will kick. And so to be running close to the horse would be very dangerous. The little boy could scare the horse could kick him and injure, maybe even kill him. And so he says he's going to be mad, and he's going to yell at the wife to take the child, and she's going to be busy with the housework and not hear her, and I shall get up and give her a kick. Now, I'm trying to picture this in my head. I'm thinking, if the kid was with the mother and leaves the mother and is running towards him, and in the process is getting dangerously close to the horse, and he's going to go kick the wife, isn't he going to be running right past the little boy? And if the little boy's in such danger, why don't you pick him up on your way? Guys, there are kids too. Dads can take care of children. Dads can change diapers. Dads can rock them to sleep. In fact, I had better luck rocking our kids to sleep than my wife did. She's too nice. She'd let them wiggle to stay awake. I'd clamp down on them and hold them tight, and they would go to sleep because they squirm to fight it. But anyway, he's going to go give her a kick. And what happens as he's daydreaming all this? He kicks over the jar of barley grits. Now, of all the stuff in this story, what is the only thing that he ever actually had the jar of barley grits. But he gets so caught up in his daydream that he loses the only thing that he had. The third story in here is the story of the transformed mouse, and this one's going to get us a little bit more into um, background here. It's set on the banks of the Ganges River, and what you're looking at is a map that shows you the Ganges River. It is the holiest river in India, and the one that devout Hindus want to be cremated at, and devout Hindus go to it to bathe. And here's a picture of that. And he goes on its shores. There's a hermitage filled with ascetics, Hindu holy men, who spend their time praying, restraining the senses, practicing asceticism, meditation, study of holy scriptures, fasting. They only drink a little bit of very pure water. All they eat is bulbs, roots, fruits, and water plants. So they're on a very strict, almost fasting diet. All they wear is an apron of bast, a loincloth. And among them is this guy Yajnavalkya, and as he is bathing in the Ganges, this little mouse drops out of the beak of a hawk into his hand. And once he finishes his bathing, what does he do with the mouse? There's a common theme in Indian literature that ascetics develop magical, mystical powers because of their self-denial. So he turns the mouse into a little girl, and since he and his wife have no children, he takes her home to raise as their daughter. And look at how old she is when it's time to get her married off. In traditional societies, girls especially tend to get married essentially as soon as they reach puberty, as soon as the plumbing starts to work. And so the father sets out to arrange a marriage for her. And he first approaches the son. And asks his daughter what she thinks about marrying the son. And she says he's too hot. You want to marry somebody who's always mad about something? Got a hot temper? And so the hermit then asks the son if there's anyone mightier than he, and the son says the cloud. Now, why is the cloud more powerful than the sun? And so the daughter goes to, he takes the daughter to the cloud, and she doesn't like him either. He is too dark and cold. Now, that's not racist. It's not a reference to dark color. It is dark mood, gloomy. You want to be with somebody who's always depressed? And so Father asks, is there anyone mightier than the cloud? And the answer is the wind. Why is the wind more powerful than the clouds? Well, he then takes the daughter to the wind. Father, he is too fickle. What does that mean? The wind is always changing. It changes direction. It changes intensity. It gusts. It lets off. It's inconstant. You want to marry somebody who loves you today and hates you tomorrow and loves you the day after? Who's always changing, who can't make up their minds? So who is mightier than the wind? Well, it's the mountain. What does she think about marrying the mountain? He is too hard and unyielding. You want to marry somebody who will never give in, who is just completely stubborn, will never compromise? So who is mightier than the mountain? And the answer is kind of surprising. It is the mice who dig their burrows in the mountain. Mice can gnaw through anything. They can gnaw through metal. Being rodents, they have very sharp teeth in front that never stop growing, and so they can just chew and chew and chew and chew and chew. And how does she react to the idea of marrying the king of the mice? Father, make me a mouse again and give me to him, in order that I may fulfill my household duties after the manner ordained for my kind. She was really a mouse all along on the inside. And so the most suitable marriage partner for her is a mouse. Now think about the moral of that story in terms of the caste system. Final story that we have in our book has to do with the greedy jackal. Now, if you don't know it, this is a jackal. It's a dog-like animal. And there's a hunter who goes out hunting, and one day he meets a boar. This is a wild boar. Notice those tusks in its mouth. Wild hogs can get surprisingly big, and they are dangerous. They will tear you to shreds. Well, the hunter, this is the days before guns. The hunter is hunting with a bow and arrow. And he shoots the arrow and it hits the boar and ultimately kills the boar, but in the meantime the boar also kills the hunter. And so there are the two of them lying dead. And along comes the jackal. Now, jackals are scavengers. While they can catch things like mice, they most often eat the leftovers from kills of larger predators, hyenas, lions, tigers, and such. And so the jackal comes along and here's all this meat. He's got the boar and he's got the hunter. And notice his explanation. Karma. Whatever you do in a past life, you receive the rewards in future lives, for the good or ill. And he thinks he must have done something good in a past life to merit getting such a windfall of meat. Again, in whatever time of life and when or where, in a former birth you did of good or ill, in just that time of life and then and there, in a future birth, of fruit shall have thy fill. He thinks he's being rewarded for some good deed in a past life. It might actually be, given what winds up happening to him, that he's being punished for some bad action in the past life. Because he sets out, he wants to, he's got a lot of food here, and so he wants to make sure he gets everything out of it. And so he starts off by eating the sinew of the bowstring. Now, in the days before synthetic materials, the bowstring would be made from animal ligaments, connected to one another, like tendons. That's what would give it the springiness to make it work. And so he starts gnawing on the bowstring. Well, the way a bow works is that it naturally wants to curve, in fact, the opposite way from the way it's curved when it's strung. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of work to string a bow because you're putting a lot of pressure on that bow. That's what puts the power into the flight of the arrow. The tension on both the bow and the bowstring, when you release the string, it makes the arrow, snaps back into place, lets the arrow fly. But the power behind it also comes from the pressure on the bow. Well, as he starts gnawing on the bowstring, what's going to happen? He cuts the string, and that releases the pressure on the bow, and so it suddenly straightens out. The bow tore through his palate, which is the roof of the mouth, and came out of his head like a top knot. A top knot is like a wad of hair that in some hairstyles is worn on top of the head. And so he's got a top knot on the top of his head, except that it is a bowstring. It's the end of the bow coming out, which of course kills him. And the moral: excessive greed should never be cherished. Have greed. It's okay to have desire, but keep it moderate. The all too greedy jackal perished, a wooden top knot on his pate. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do in the discussion is to think about the moral of each of these stories and tie it into some aspect of Hinduism that we talked about in the previous module.